Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it over to Rafael Portuguese, also goes by Rafa, and I'm going to kind of man the Zoom as people enter, but I want to be conscious of our time because we don't have a lot of time and make sure that we use it in full. So I will turn it over to Rafa and he can probably introduce himself way better than I can introduce him. So welcome, Rafa. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. I want to start off and preface this that if you hear children screaming in the background, it's because I have three young boys, and that does happen in our house sometimes. Always have to give everyone a little bit of awareness. It's really nice to be here. I've been working in the field of mental health for many years. I think it was in the bio, 10 or 12 years. You kind of lose count. And I really, this is something I'm very, the topic of tonight is really about, parenting and kind of awareness, not only of yourselves individually, but also of your teens. I've been at Kaiser, so I work with, I'm at Kaiser for the last couple of years. I work with adults and teens and families and parents. And before that, I've worked in homes, at schools. I have a private practice. So, I've been really involved in a lot of different areas over the course of the years, and especially over these last, few years in the pandemic, providing treatment virtually and, to a wide variety of parents and teens, like kind of everyone has really kind of, I think, noticed the trend and the increase in the need for care and support and the importance of mental health, not only for our first line responders, but across the board. And especially as parents, I think that this is, an area where you see the effects not only in your kids, but you really feel them in ways that maybe you haven't ever before, not only individually as individuals, but as parents, as adults, as employees, as educators. You've had to be teachers, you've had to be psychologists, you've had to take on so many different roles, especially over the last few years, that I think increasing understanding around that and what can be done and what areas of support exist is really important. And so that's kind of what tonight is about, and it's the opportunity. So if you have questions as we go, I'm going to be moving through the material, but I think we're a fairly small and nice, intimate group. Feel free to kind of type into the chat as questions come up, and I'll try to kind of get to them as we go, as well as at the end, there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers as well. But before we start, I kind of like to give an opportunity if anyone has any questions or any comments before we begin. Otherwise, I'll just kind of go through the presentation and then we can kind of go from there. Okay, so bear with me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. All right, so I won't be able to see the chat, so I'm going to have Rebecca hopefully can help me out with that. So
I'll watch the chat. So please feel free to put things in at any time and I can see it. So I'll let Rafa know.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate it. So just to start, I chose the title of tonight is Parenting in the Age of COVID because I do think that is what we're talking about. This is a unique experience. Parenting in itself is a unique and challenging process where every year that you do it, you're parenting a new child. Parenting a 5-year-old is different than parenting a 6-year-old, and parenting a 10-year-old is different than parenting an 11, and it goes on. Every year it's a new set of experiences and challenges. And then in the last few years, I think there have been just these added components and changes that were out of all of our controls that have really affected not only your mental health, but the mental health of your families, of the children, of the teachers, of everyone involved. And so I just kind of thought that title was all encompassing around that. So today, as we go through, these are kind of the themes I want to kind of cover. I'm going to discuss a few of the mental health trends that not only I've observed, but have been reported, and some of the stats are taken from CDC, kind of noticing those mental health trends throughout the pandemic. Some specific ways that it's been observed that this pandemic has affected teenagers, all youth, but teenagers as well. Strategies for managing the pandemic, parenting tips and strategies, as well as that's also a section that I do want to kind of open up, and when we get there, we can talk about it to a little bit of maybe discussion. and then questions and answer portion at the end. So just to start, it's not the happiest news, but I think it's somewhat understandable that I think all of us could understand and relate to, is that over the last several years, there's been a clear and steady increase in symptoms across, and I'm starting with adults. This is across the adult population. And I think this is important that we all kind of acknowledge and share. And I think this is an important thing that I've really made an emphasis to point out to everyone that I work with, teens and especially parents, is your mental health, all of our mental health has been affected over the last year. So during the August of 2020 to February 2021, this just shows this steady increase of anxiety and depression from 36% to 41.5 as per what's reported. So this is only what's been reported. And I've seen this increase in my work, that everyone is coming in with much higher levels of anxiety. That's been a kind of across the board, that the levels of stress and anxiety have increased just because of the demands that have existed over the last 2 years, the social isolation, the difficulties kind of communicating with others, getting outside of the house, being kind of stuck in a bubble, as well as just the natural anxiety of this illness roaming around and the anxiety that that creates. And it's been noticed in a lot of different ways. It's been noticed not only in people's motivation, their moods, their ability to engage with others, feelings of feeling highly isolated, increased levels of anger and reactivity, especially to those that we are closest to. And it tends to come out, right? Especially when we don't feel good about ourselves, or we don't feel good just in general, like it affects our relationships with others and how we communicate. And that's been a huge telltale sign over the last few years of just everyone reporting that that's been difficult. And I've seen a high increase. I work in hospitals too. I do, risk assessments, and I've seen a really high increase in adults and teens presenting in the emergency departments with safety concerns. Sometimes it's just everyone's just feeling overwhelmed and burnt out, and especially with that recent increase, with Omicron, that kind of we felt like everything. A lot of people felt like everything was moving in the right direction, and then we kind of got slammed again, and it created this sense of helplessness, like hit us with another like huge wave of helplessness that really affected everybody. And often when we feel our control has been taken from us, whether we're teenagers, whether we're parents, whether we're adults, whoever we are at whatever age, it really brings us down and affects how we're able to regulate and take care of ourselves and those around us. So I just wanted to share that's just kind of across the board. So if any of you have experienced this, I know I've experienced it myself, it would be very much understandable. And I want to normalize this. So before COVID-19 is the yellow, and during COVID-19 is the blue. And this is just adults with depressive symptoms. And what I really wanted to note here and for you to kind of see is that the severity is what increased. All of us are experiencing our mental health symptoms at a much more severe rate. We all get sad, we all get anxious, but that because of the environment in which we are now living, it has all become much more intense and much more severe because none of us have ever experienced anything like this before. And so when you try to kind of do things in the same way you might have before, you have no balancing. You have no way to kind of reflect and say like, well, I've done this before. I could talk to someone and they've gone through it. Like it's very isolating and can make us really experience a sense that we're not going to be able to manage it. So I want to talk about taking care of yourselves and what that can look like, because noticing this as parents and understanding how you've been affected over the last few years is really important, because you need to take care of yourselves before you can take care of your kids. And I really emphasize this with everyone that I work with. I like to use the analogy of, when you're on the airplane and the stewardess goes over her safety or his safety or their safety tip, where they're saying, You need to put on your mask first before you put on that of your child if you're traveling with a young child. This very much exists now in terms of mental health. If you want to support your young people, you also need to support yourself. And it's important to utilize your communities and utilize access and self-care. This has all been a traumatic experience. And I just want that to be said. We've all been traumatized by COVID. It shut us down and it isolated us. It made us afraid of our neighbor. It made us feel like we couldn't be with family. It made us feel like we couldn't allow ourselves or those around us to live the kind of life that they're supposed to be doing. It created symptoms of guilt, like anger, frustration, helplessness. We've had our power and our individuality in a way taken away because we're not able to go and do the things that make us ourselves over these last few years. And especially for the young people, that's been there too. So I always encourage, and I want to encourage us all to kind of think together, like, how has my psyche been affected over the last few years? You know, before people have gone back into the class, before they've done different things, like, how has my psyche been affected? And kind of notice, what are the things that are triggering me now, maybe in ways that didn't before? And how am I reacting in ways that I want to maybe shift? And so what I've taught a lot of people, and so I encourage all of you to start doing, is parenting from like a mindful place as much as possible. And mindfulness doesn't mean meditating every day, although that can be helpful. Some people are great at it. I'm horrible at it, so I don't pretend to be a great person at that and be amazing at it, but I do know that in small doses it can be really helpful. But mindfulness is just about knowing yourself and understanding what balance feels like at home, when you're outside, when you're with people, knowing that things are going to make you feel different ways and understanding how to react to them in ways that make you feel good about your reaction. That's mindfulness. It's just increasing your awareness and kind of noticing what over the last few years have really triggered and affected you in a way that has shaped how you interact with others, especially your kids and your other parents or the teachers, or that, because your roles have really shifted over the last few years in different ways. So the mental health trends were on the rise, like I was speaking to, and this is kind of more for the younger people. We've just seen, I've worked in the child psychiatry in San Francisco as well, and there's just been this huge increase in acuity. So we've seen really high levels based on a lot of the stuff that I was already discussing. A lot of our teens are, experiencing hopelessness. And even right before the pandemic, we were seeing those trends increase, and the pandemic only amplified what was already kind of increasing as a bit of a mental health crisis for our young people. And this isn't to scare you. This is just meant to kind of bring awareness to the realization and the reality that young people, are experiencing mental health concerns at a higher level maybe than they have in the past. And so it's important to do things like you're doing today, to have conversations, to bring awareness, and you might already be there, but just to think, what to look out for, what to notice, and what can be done to support. And I do know that teenagers are very strong-willed, and all kids can be, and sometimes when you try to help, it feels like you can't, but there are ways to do it. And we'll talk about those as well, especially during like the question and answers. I think that's a great opportunity for us to all talk together about that. But I did want to highlight a few groups that not only have I seen, but have been shown to been more affected over the course of the last few years by mental health concerns around many in the LGBTQ community, young people kind of struggling with it, finding themselves and feeling like they're being understood. That's been a huge issue. There's been a lot of depression, a lot of suicidality, a lot of self-harm, a lot of anxiety in those populations. And I've worked with a lot of young people around this and their families, and finding community has been one of the biggest contributors to success and to feeling grounded, no matter who it is. It's finding community. So I just wanted to kind of highlight a few of those, as well as, just across the board, culturally, certain groups that I work with a lot, like the Latin population. There's been a lot of challenges there as well, for a wide variety of reasons. African American students, and there's just been this increase in depression and anxiety, and especially over the last few years, because of that loss of continuity of community and connection. So just in terms of years of age, as well as levels of depression and anxiety and behavioral disorders identified, you see that as teens move into the start to begin that transition into the high school years, we tend to see a high increase in that, because they're trying to, a little bit of it is a normal aspect and part of teen development. Teens are supposed to be a little moodier. They're going through, hormonal changes, identity crises, trying to find who they are, wanting to be more independent while also still needing support, which is very confusing for them, and they don't often know how to find a balance. The other thing is teens, they really increase their awareness, but their prefrontal cortex doesn't really fully form until they're in their 20s, which is the part of our brain that helps with rational thinking. So that usually means the teenage years are highly impulsive, very emotionally reactive, and that's why we see this trend in increase during that age period. And so that's why being aware of what those signs are can really help you as parents kind of notice when something might be moving in the direction where an increased level of support would be really highly beneficial, and what kind of support might be best. So I just like to highlight that, and also explain that some of that moodiness and that reactivity is normal and understandable for that age range. So during COVID, stressors on our teens has highly increased, and really kind of expanded and delayed certain transitions and development socially, emotionally, behaviorally, that might have happened maybe a little more normally if the pandemic had not occurred. A lot of the teens, like their social development, their understanding of themselves and their emotions and how to regulate comes from those interactions outside of the home, in their interactions with adults other than their parents. Having those transitions of going to school, interacting with a teacher, talking to other adults, talking to friends, having those social interactions, having the breakdowns, having someone else help them. And during the pandemic, it was all on the parents for a long period of time, where parents were having to be the teacher, the counselor, the principal, the parent, the friend, the everything. And so there was none of that shifting and those different experiences and those different interactions, and it was very harmful not only on the parents but on the teens and your relationships at times. I don't know if this is what happened to any of you specifically. I just know, speaking towards patterns that I've noticed over the last few years. And so because there is kind of what I was speaking to, that lack of development and like psychological capability to like really be resilient and think rationally about emotions and about feelings and about experiences, imagine having everything kind of everything you're looking forward to removed and taken away, and then having to still try to kind of develop and try to grow. It was a very shocking experience for teens. And like I ran a bunch of teen groups, and just the general theme was just feeling alone. Like, and the fact that we were doing everything through Zoom, that was really hard for them. And, hard for us as clinicians, because being present with the people that we work with is usually so important. And so it's been an incredible challenge for the teens and for us as clinicians to really feel like we can connect. But there are ways, and we've been able to do it. But our teens really just got hit really hard, and it's a hard time to be in that transitional phase of development and then have your world kind of shrunk. So I know that a lot of teens have leaned on those ways to connect with the outside world that I know makes a lot of parents anxious, like social media, virtual reality, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Discord. I'm sure there's like 5 I don't know the name of. I'm trying to catch up, but it's understandable because they didn't have anywhere else to go. So, video games, I know a lot of parents, I worked with a lot of parents where, they used to have like these kind of screen restrictions and like things like that. And they kind of just felt like they couldn't do it anymore. I can completely relate to that in my personal life and my professional life. And, and I think a lot of parents dealt with a lot of guilt around this and feeling like they were failing as parents. And then the teens were, it's just been very, I think, difficult and chaotic in trying to find the balance. And so and we could talk about that more in a little bit, but like the balance is really so that you as a parent feel okay and your teen feels okay around things like that and communicating about it effectively. That's what's helped a lot of people navigate it as we transition back. Because, as we transition back more to like in person and things like that, and screen restrictions kind of come back, there's been a lot of conflict that I've seen and that I've worked with families and teens around. Because then it's changing back and there's a lot of resistance. But so the stressors, motivations, all of that have been affected. Inefficient ability to process these circumstances have really affected the teens, and not really fully understanding or being okay with it. A lot of anger, understandably. So routines were taken away. Routines are huge for our young teenagers and for anyone developing, as well as us as parents and adults. Our routines are what usually give us balance and a sense of control and a sense of normalcy. And when that was really taken away, that really negatively affected not only the families, but the teens as well. Breaks in learning, all of that the education was gone. They were trying to figure out how to do this virtually. One of the other biggest contributors to mental health was a lot of young people like not doing well in school. And that was leading to a lot of conflict with parents. Like, why aren't your grades, like, I'm sitting here with you, like a lot of resistance. I don't know if any of you remember being a teenager, but most kids or teens don't want their parents teaching them. I can barely give my kid like 5 minutes of help with his homework, let alone, teach him a whole course. It affected the relationship and the limits. And, teens really felt really insecure about their academics during the virtual phase. Because I know a lot of teens struggled and they felt stupid, felt angry, felt like this is dumb, didn't feel motivated. You stare at a screen all day. They didn't get those changes, those routines where like you go to school, you're in class, like that helps. Those transitions help. Being in a location to learn and feeling like there's a separation. I mean, I don't know if any of you have felt like this ever, but even just me, working from home has been an adjustment. Like it used to be you go, you work in your office, you see everyone. Then you come home and it's separate and it's just different, and it gives you that balance that was kind of really taken away. And especially for our young people, that really kind of negatively affected their ability to differentiate and feel like they had those breaks. They just, everything was at home, school, parenting, homework. There was no escape. And I know things are getting better, and that's wonderful. These last 2 years have left somewhat of a lasting effect, and that's why it's important for parents and for all of you to kind of be aware of these things. And I'm sure you are, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir a little bit about some of this stuff, but it's important to be spoken to, because I feel that there's lingering effects, and there will be lingering effects for parents as well as for the teens and for the families. And so having that awareness and that increased understanding can only help facilitate your conversations with your families and help navigate these ongoing and uncertain times. And then I just wanted to highlight again just the significant life events that are not happening in the way that a lot of young people and parents kind of look forward to, like graduations, birthday parties, prom. I can't tell you how many seniors I worked with that were just devastated they didn't get their prom. That's something that a lot of high school kids, we look forward to it. I mean, I remember being really excited about it for years, and then I got to do it, and that was taken away. And it was just out of our control, and there really wasn't anything to do other than say, like, I'm really sorry and I wish it was different, and to validate those feelings. I know some people did like the virtual proms and stuff, and that felt like kind of okay, but there is no replacement for some of those losses. And so it's important for us all to validate each other around these experiences. We don't want to step around them. We don't want to say, no, it's okay, because that's not true. It's not okay what happened. But we validate. We say, yeah, that's really terrible, and that shouldn't have happened that way. And those things were really hard. And so there's just all of these contributing factors. And I know it's already halfway, so I know we're getting a little low on time, so I'll keep moving forward. But I could talk about this topic for a long time, because it's something that I really, really care about and I really see as an important thing. So I want to just highlight what to look for in your young people, and this is not just for young people, but for yourselves as well, as like kind of signs to kind of notice if increased support is going to be needed. Finding a therapist, finding a group, maybe finding avenues or connection, having more check-ins, whatever it might be. But if you notice, any of these signs in your teens, it's just, and some of it is normal teenage behavior. So, I don't want to say if you see this, there's something going on. When you see these at a level that seems extreme or seems like more than what might be typical, especially if it's a significant shift in your young person or in your family member's typical behavior, that's when you want to kind of maybe pay a little more extra attention, maybe ask a few extra questions, kind of notice a little more. But, those losing interest, if you notice people losing interest in things that they typically have enjoyed, lethargy, like walking around with really low energy, not getting out of bed, spending, kind of isolation behavior, especially if, someone's typically pretty social. That's something to notice. And I know that's kind of hard to pay attention to over the last few years. And that, there's still kind of a little bit of boundaries and barriers with, people going out and people being social in that way. But there are other forms of isolation, someone who used to text and call their friends a lot, not doing that. Someone who used to be really into online gaming, all of a sudden shutting down and being like, no, I don't want to play anymore. Big changes like that. And those are the ones to notice. Any sort of changes in the routines that seem significantly altered, like someone used to be really into going for runs regularly and all of a sudden they stop. Any excessive drug use or drinking, obviously risky behavior, reported thoughts of suicide, it's like there's texts or notes, things like that. Obviously that's a big warning sign, and immediate resources are available if that does occur, and we can talk about those too at the end. And then just kind of noticing if there's high fluctuations in mood, all of a sudden really high, then all of a sudden really low, and it seems really dramatic. And those are things to watch out for. And then obviously auditory or visual hallucinations. So I'm not saying that these are going to be happening. I'm just saying there's just kind of signs to look out for and just pay attention to as you parent in this period of time. So good news, strategies exist. Relationships are the key now, as we're starting to transition out of hopefully doing more social things. I know there's mask mandates being lifted. More things are opening up. There's more opportunities to foster relationships within the community, possibly do more things outside as a family, or young people to do them with friends, for you to do them with your friends. I hope all of you are doing things like that too. But that's been the biggest thing that I think has allowed a lot of people to turn around, at least the ones that I've, the people that I work with that I've really seen, when they're able to, and over the pandemic, able to connect in different ways, whether it be virtual or in person. So finding common interests, that's been huge. And in the end, that's the biggest thing. Whether it's around music, video games, sports, hiking, climbing, whatever it is, whatever the thing is that social connection is amazing. Now, I do want to speak to to the reality though that I know some people aren't as social and feel a little more comfortable in like smaller groups and things like that, but there still is a need to connect, whether it's with you as the parents, whether it's with maybe just one or two other people, or a community like on a Discord server. I know sometimes, as long as it's being done safely, I know there's only so much that can be regulated there, but those connections can be really helpful. Finding that kind of commonality, whether it's around K-pop or dance videos. I know that's been one as well. So there's a lot of different ones out there now, which are good. So building new routines as you transition back, as we're transitioning out of like the old COVID, we're getting past hopefully these 2 years, is helping yourselves and your families build new routines that support your kind of the things that you enjoy, the things that help keep all of you healthy. Having open conversations around the changes has been huge. And really a lot of parents being honest about like, yeah, I'm frustrated too. What are you mad? Like having those really open conversations about what's been going on, what are the fears, what are the concerns, not only for the teens, but for the parents. That's been really helpful. And, creating more opportunities to share experiences, even though sometimes it does feel, maybe it feels a little forced with your teen or with your kid, still just doing it. If they're interested in something that you think doesn't make any sense, trying to learn more about it actually goes a pretty long way. Like I've gotten really good at Fortnite. It's not my favorite, but it's helped, and it's actually kind of fun. So it's not terrible, but finding those common interests, common activities to do together at home that are moving you past, that are just relaxed, maybe bringing back like old traditions. If you had traditions before the pandemic that you kind of fell to the wayside as you were going through, or finding new traditions, whether it's like a sushi night or board game night or movie, whatever it is, kind of exploring and trying out different ones. And just because it's not successful the first 10 times you try, it just means maybe it hasn't been the right thing yet. And showing the interest and the desire to do it, even if you do get shut down as a parent, that goes a long way, even though it might feel a little helpless sometimes. So I'll wrap up there so I leave plenty of time for questions and discussion, because I think this is a big topic, and one that I would imagine all of you have some thoughts and feelings on. And if you have questions or discussion topics, I would really love to be a part of that and to help facilitate that. So I know I talked a lot, so sorry about that. Let me see. So nothing in the chat. I can't hear you, Rebecca.
I'm on mute.
There we go.
I've been looking at it as we go, but feel free, anyone, just to jump in. If you're not comfortable talking to the group, please put it in the chat, and Rafa will answer it. If it's children related, I can support and jump in.
Sure.
So Rafa, thank you for your presentation and for putting together, I think, many of the feelings, if not all, that we have been through and still perhaps going to a certain extent. So very interesting, your graphs with the percentages of and the changes in terms of anxiety and everything. I understand you're talking teens in general. I was curious to hear, since we are the parents of our different and unique children, I wonder if the statistics was sort of skyrocketing in the case of our little darlings.
It's been across the board, and especially for, I can't believe I didn't mention it. Especially, I think a lot of times I work with a lot of young people on the spectrum as well, or other, learning challenges. And that's even, if not amplified it at times, it's really increased it, just given how important and how helpful routines can be, and the importance of them. And when that was taken away, wow, so incredibly challenging on the family
Absolutely. In my case, one of the first things that I implemented was a routine. A new one, but a routine for sure. I think it helped. But something that it really, and I would like to know if it happened to other people, but something that it really was mind-blowing is during the time of the wars, when they were at home for 15 months. My kid is 16 now, so he was 14 when this started. He was not complaining about a thing other than the usual. The school stuff is done, this is stupid, so now it's even more stupid. He has ADHD and sensory processing disorder. And it's pretty smart. Anyhow, so the usual complaints were amplified, right? And I just saw that he was more angry, that he would react quicker and bigger to anything. But he didn't say anything. It has been after the wars when he finally one day he almost exploded, and I don't remember why it was. We were talking about maybe his birthday celebration or something, which is big for him, and it's also on Halloween, so it's always like double. And he finally said that he was sick and tired of the pandemic, and he was virtually yelling, and that he was not about to miss other celebration or to have more crap in his life. And then when I realized that I was watching every day, but it was even bigger than I thought in the beginning, because he was not even expressing himself, even as much as I was trying to understand how bad it was. Yes, I needed to know how bad it was for me. So just to imagine for him would be probably double, because they don't have our resources in terms of experience, in terms of life, and also they are dealing with their special circumstances. So anyhow, I just wanted to share that, because for me, it was like, oh my God, so it really was that bad.
I really appreciate you sharing, and I think your story is telling, and I really appreciate that you were willing to put that out there, because that's a very common story. One, because it's there, it's young people are being affected, whether or not they're speaking about it, it's there. And especially when you see the increase in emotional reactivity and like anger, usually that young people typically, when they're experiencing like levels of depression or anxiety, it often can come out as anger, which we can all relate to. Like, I'm sure there's days where you're really anxious or feeling down, and your ability to regulate your emotions is just shot. And so with teens, because of the impulsivity, and younger people because of the inability to quite get to regulating all of that, it comes out very, very explosive. And I'm glad that he eventually let you know how he felt.
Yeah, absolutely, because he's a social kid, and I absolutely agree with you. There is nothing more important, more healing, more everything than your social interaction, even if it's with one other person. Your network, whoever is your network, your community, crucially important, vital for all of us. And that was obviously greatly hurt, as we know, during those months. And then, as you said, you start feeling many things, including very hopeless. You start amplifying actually every single problem, because you don't have the reality of other people in front of you sort of putting things in context or sharing their own misery. Sometimes it helps when you are sharing your own sadness or your own happiness with someone else. You can change how the other person feels, right? We all know that. So yeah, as I said, you have touched the most important, for me, fundamental problems during the pandemic.
And I see, Rafa, here a chat came in. My teenager just asked for help. He feels really lonely. He is a student at Tilden, so by design, it's lonely. It's a one-on-one school. He does not have a community at his swim team.
He does have a community, it says.
Yes, excuse me. He does have a community, his swim team, but longs for more. What is the first steps? Finding a group, therapy, individual? Maybe you can speak to.
Yeah, absolutely. one, it's good that there's a community there. I'm really glad that, I mean, that how great to, I mean, not great that that your kid needs the help, but how great that your kid was able to communicate with you, I need help. And when it comes to kind of exploring what are the next steps, it's really about having that conversation with your child and seeing what they're comfortable with. Individual therapy can be really, really helpful and really powerful. And even if it's just kind of sharing a space with someone where you feel like you can talk about anything and it's protected. Like there really is, and they've actually done research studies where they've, because now they can, study the brain, and actually having that space where you can talk and feel completely safe. I mean, obviously we all have people we feel like we can talk to, but typically it's like a partner or a friend. There's an emotional component that doesn't quite allow for that for a full feeling of just I'm being understood. And that's something that therapy can provide and can be incredibly helpful. It's not the only thing. It should also be supplemented with experiences, trying to get out. Like I do know Tilden does have a little bit more of that one-on-one, and so school doesn't quite provide the social opportunity at Tilden that it might elsewhere. So like exploring other options. I mean, the one great thing that does exist now are opportunities to get involved in a lot of activities if you have interest. So I worked with, just to give an example, I worked with a teen that was really into like Magic the Gathering, the card game. And so we talked for a while, and before things were kind of shut down. But we found like this online community where you could do like Zoom battles and like Zoom Magic battles, and so that kind of helped. And then now that like comic book stores have opened back up, and we worked on feeling comfortable with going, and like on the weekends they have tournaments and things like that, and so that's provided access to doing more, and that's helped. It's helped to meet other people with shared interests and feel like you have something to do on the weekend, because for the last 2 years people have felt like there is no weekend. It's just especially as parents, I mean, you can really get caught on the hamster wheel in general, and then throw on a pandemic, it's like the hamster wheel like times a million. So those changes in routine, seeing if your kid is open to like trying different stuff, that's been what I've found has been the most helpful. And just being encouraging, and just probably going to be some resistance. There usually is. There was with all the young people that I've worked with. It's just being consistent with the message and like really encouraging, like, no, that's a good thing. Like I understand you don't want to do it, but just maybe it'd be fun. Stuff like that. Like I do even know that there's like they have like meetup is one, or like meet. They have like teen ones where it's like people can like meet up and hang out and like go see live music, or like do stuff like that. There's a lot of things like that. But I do think therapy can also be really helpful to give someone a space to talk if that's something that someone feels like they might need. And so like often involving your teens or your kids in that discussion is really important. And it's different than saying like, hey, I got you a therapist, to saying like, hey, why don't we go and look and see if there's anyone that looks like on Psychology Today, or there's a few of them out there where you can like look at therapists and like read their bios and be like, do any of these people feel like someone you could talk to, and involve them in the process.
I wrote this question because I couldn't, I had to escape my teenager to talk freely. He's grumpy after the swim practice. So he already got several names of the friends, but because I have zero experience in the mental health department, I don't know what is the difference. Psychiatry, psychology, like group, not group. Can you talk slightly more about that?
Psychiatry is someone who prescribes medication, and they're a doctor. Sometimes they do therapy like as along as part of their prescribing medication. Usually their fees are much higher, but that's because they work with medication and they can prescribe. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, so I provide individual, group, and family therapy. I can do all that stuff. So that's another kind. It's just a therapist. There's also psychologists who would be a PhD, but all of it, in the end, you're just looking for someone that seems like they would connect or like they could understand. And sometimes it's okay if it's not, you try someone and it doesn't feel it doesn't feel like the right fit. That's perfectly fine, and that's pretty normal. Because it's like if you try to make friends with someone, like you're not going to get along with everybody. So it's ridiculous to think that you're going to be able to talk to any therapist that you talk to because we all have different personalities. So, but that would be the biggest thing. But psychiatrists, medication, psychologists, therapists, more therapy, and there are groups out there. Usually sometimes they're like 2 hours long. So it depends. And you can look online. There's a lot of resources out there. Psychology Today has a lot of like groups and individual therapists listed there.
And Eula, if you want to talk offline at some point, there's a lot of resources I have, both through Tilden and just my own private practice. So we can talk and I can give you some resources and kind of walk you through the process, also knowing who your kiddo is. So
Yes, thank you so much.
Feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts, comments? I can share very briefly that in my own experience, I've found that it's important for not only the parents that I've worked with, but for myself as a parent and as an adult and as a human being, to have my own therapy. And I've found that was incredibly helpful, and continues to be, to make sure not only that I'm a good clinician, but I'm a good father, a good person, as best as I can be most of the time. But it's good as parents for you to have that space as well. And so I always encourage, it doesn't mean you got to go every week. Therapy isn't for people where something's wrong. Therapy is just a space to really use it. And if your insurance covers it, then it's a nice resource for you too, because this pandemic isn't only hard on your kids, it's hard on everybody.
I recently spoke to a kid and then offhand a parent as kind of looking at it as like, it's maintenance, right? It's their well-being. And kind of taking the stigma out, because I know for a lot of teens, there's stigma around it, and reframing it is so essential. Of this is just maintenance, well-being, a place for you to land for a minute.
Yeah. It's also gotten much less stigmatized at the same time. Like there is a stigma, but the stigma is something needs to be wrong for you to go. Like something's broken that needs to be fixed. And I always start off every first session or group, or just kind of remind everyone, this isn't no one's broken. Everyone's just human, and having a space to kind of explore how to be more of the self that you want to be. That's all it is. It's just exploration and support.
Thank you, Rafa, for that. Absolutely
Sure.
true.
Yeah.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left, so I'll keep it open if anyone has any more comments.
Yeah, and if anyone has follow-up questions too afterwards, I'll show my email and my website at the end. You can always, shoot me an email if you want, have a follow-up question, or looking for a resource or something, as well as, Rebecca has my information as well. So you can always go through her. And, I'm always here to support in any way that I can.
Well, thank you so much, Rafa. This has been really timely, really helpful. And
of course.
I'm sure
I'll share my information really quickly. Let me share the slide. I had it on a slide. Oh, and then I just wanted to share this. I don't know if anyone needs it, but hold on, give me 1 second. But these are some phone numbers. So This is the crisis text line. Teens can text at any time, 741-741, and you text go, or you just text a word, and it's like crisis support. So if like a teen is ever, so like I have a lot of teens that I work with, put these numbers in their phones, as well as the making sure they have phone numbers for like trusted friends, relatives, like people they can call if they're starting to feel really overwhelmed. Non-emergency number, just, and I'm not saying anyone's going to need it, but a lot of teams that I've worked with, they just have this in there. I have them put that in their phones just to have it. You never know. And then here is just the references. This is my contact information. If it's hard to see, I can type it into the chat, which it's, oh, hold on. Okay, here we go. Let's see, from this one. Okay, so it's raphaelpmft@outlook.com. That's my email. This is my website, which is raphaelportugueselmft.com. You can also message me through there if you have any follow-up questions, or feel free to reach out. Okay.
Thank you, Rafa.
Sure.
And if you did that, it was a lot of fast moving parts, or as tech savvy as I am, feel free to contact me because I have this information on file always.
Yeah. And I really appreciate all of you giving me the opportunity to talk to you and to be here to share this space for a little while. It's a testament to how much you care about your kids, and this can be scary information, but it's not meant to scare you. It's just to help you feel not only validated in your concerns, but feel understood and know that there are resources out there and that there is a lot of support, and you are by far not the only people experiencing these different things. And I know that might be silly to say, and I'm sure you know it rationally, but it's important to hear as well. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you, everybody. And again, thank you, Rafa.